Why, that dresser belongs in a museum. Her husband laughed at his wife's inheritance. But as soon as the woman opened the secret compartment after the divorce. Welcome to our channel, and we invite you to watch a video with our new original story. Valentina held a notice from the notary in her hands and couldn't make sense of it. What inheritance? What property outside the city? She'd never had any relatives who'd leave behind a mansion. This had to be some mistake. She needed to go and sort it out. 3 heads with obviously hungry eyes popped into the doorway at once. The youngest, Esteban, immediately started demanding, "Mom, it's Saturday. Where are my favorite pancakes for breakfast? We still have to go to the park, to the rides. You and Dad promised." Her husband, Juan Carlos, and their eldest daughter, Consuelo, were less categorical. "Are you worried about something, or is it just me?" That was from Juan Carlos, her lawfully wedded. "Mom, the eggs and milk are already on the table. Should I mix the batter for the pancakes myself if you're not in the mood today?" That was their faithful helper, Consuelo. Valentina remembered a TV commercial where, in every spot, the hero's home was in turmoil at first, and then a voiceover solemnly announced, "My family." And suddenly, all the characters became understanding, loving, kind. She always felt something similar with her loved ones. At first, it seems everything is bad, and then, bam! You realize it's all trifles as long as they're together. Everything turns out fine for them, though not without obstacles. She and Juan Carlos were a seasoned couple. 20 years together is no joke. Since their student days, they'd tested each other through every life upheaval. Their eldest daughter, Consuelo, was businesslike. Their friends always joked, "Guillermo, you approached kids wisely. First a babysitter, then a baby." Pure truth. There were 12 years between Consuelo and Esteban. Valentina and Juan Carlos wanted a second child very much. But it just wouldn't happen. They never thought they'd go that route. But as soon as the head of the family started earning well, Valentina decided on Akik's VF. Their tousle-haired, spoiled Esteban was a test tube baby. Another miracle of reproductive technology. 7 years ago, the doctors had said there was no point in waiting. It was useless, no options. She would never be able to conceive naturally again. And Juan Carlos was obsessed with another baby, dreaming of a son. So Valentina gathered her courage. She went through all the doubts, failed attempts, and heavy thoughts. Undoubtedly, now she didn't regret a thing. But back then, she drank it all to the lees. Valentina sent the kids to the kitchen and showed her husband the source of her puzzlement. "Juan Carlos, look through all the papers inside the envelope. There's a copy of a certificate of inheritance for a house. It's in a village 200 kilometers from our city. There's also a cover letter, an invitation to the notary. This message is a complete surprise to me. I've never known any aunt who would leave me this property." Juan Carlos turned the documents over in his hands and read them carefully. The letter attached to the certificate clearly stated that Vargas Maximiliana requested her attorney to locate Guillermo Valentina, her grandniece. He was to escort the heiress, by prior arrangement, to Maximiliana's house, hand over the keys to all the rooms once the niece accepted the inheritance, and acquaint her with the family privileges due to the heiress. It's a rather flowery letter, as if written by a very old person or a devotee of classical literature, noted Juan Carlos. The style is odd, unfamiliar. But if it must be done, it must be done. Let it be a trip, an adventure for the whole family. The kids had been cooped up at home, one with studies, the other with clubs. Everywhere you take him, well, this will be an unusual attraction for them. But first, let's go to the notary. The weekend passed in standard domestic mode. Practically an adult by her own measure, Consuelo ran off to the movies with friends to see a love story. Juan Carlos, Valentina, and Esteban spent the rest of the day at the park. Valentina couldn't explain why a worm of doubt had taken up residence in her soul. Was it worth getting involved with this inheritance at all? Why did they need some house in the countryside? They had lived fine without it. Juan Carlos didn't share her opinion. We have a car, nothing fancy, but it works. We'll renovate that little house, and we'll have a place in the country. What if there's a river or a pond nearby? And if it's a detached house and not an apartment, there should be a plot of land too, right? Juan Carlos looked at Valentina intently. Darling, I'd like you to give me another child. Or better, two. Would you consider going through IVF again? Think about it. Valentina decided she'd misheard. Give birth again? Go through all the circles of hell connected with in vitro fertilization again at 40? She could never even pronounce the term right on the first try, and what followed it she always remembered with horror. Esteban was born only after the third attempt. What weighed on her most was the waiting period. Did it work or not? That daisy petal guessing became the hardest part of the whole process for her. How could the idea even occur to Juan Carlos that she'd go through all that again? All the formalities at the notary were completed very quickly and precisely. The only thing was that Juan Carlos and Valentina flatly refused any escort to the property. The next weekend, they would go themselves to get acquainted with the little house. Final decision, not subject to appeal. The children were on cloud 9. Changes were in store for the family, and they were invited to take part in a real adventure. They found the village with the inherited house on the map without any trouble. A miniature cluster of buildings surrounded on all sides by lawns of lush green grass and thickets of wildflowers. Not a landscape, but pure, charming pastoral. That was the exact word that came to Valentina's mind. Even Consuelo, urban to the core in all her habits, melted at the sight. And though the house itself turned out to be quite old and dilapidated, it had a warm soul. Everyone felt it at once when they crossed the threshold. Inside, there was a contrast. Tired furniture from bygone days, a vacuum tube TV with a convex screen, a cabinet with mismatched dishes, a bed with a checkered bedspread, all side by side with elegant chairs. Beautiful wooden legs, proud carved backs, round seats. Little Esteban's eyes lit up with curious stars. He immediately asked, "Did a fairy tale queen live here? Did she sit on these chairs? Or did she have a throne?" Valentina laughed. "As it turns out, my dear, one of your great-grandmothers lived here. It so happened we never knew her. She's gone up to heaven now, and she left this house to me. Settle in here with Consuelo for now, and Dad and I will look over the other rooms." Consuelo slyly tapped Esteban on the head in a playful way and lectured. "Mom and I went to the theater. There's a museum there. They told us all about these old chairs. They're often used in productions about aristocratic life. They're made with a steam-bending method. They hold the pieces in hot steam, and the seats become practically eternal and as light as feathers. We should tell Mom and Dad to take one home. I'll use it to study at the computer." Meanwhile, Valentina and Juan Carlos were examining 2 other rooms. If there was a bed in the first, what were the other 2 for? A parlor, another bedroom, a wardrobe? How had this Maximiliana Vargas lived? It seemed there had been an important person in the country's history with that surname. Or were they mixing things up? They should have studied history better at school. Why had this woman never made herself known? In the far room, a strange piece of furniture caught Juan Carlos's eye. At first glance, it looked like a sizable chest, with drawers adorned with handles in the shape of elegant monograms. Valentina stroked the dusty surface and immediately identified it. Juan Carlos, look, it's an antique dresser, all carved from wood, surely from valuable species. On each door there's a little scene of social life. Here a gentleman is kissing a lady's hand. Over there they're hunting. Here they're playing chess. As many doors as there are different pictures. She couldn't help herself. Kids, come here quickly. You definitely haven't seen such a wonder. A minute later, they were all examining the antique work of art together, chattering over one another as usual. Things like this belong only in a museum, was the head of the family's verdict. Mom, step aside a bit so I can take a photo and send it to the girls, said Consuelo. My great-grandma didn't have a throne. She had this big box with doors. Esteban recalled his fairy tale theory. With commanding gestures, Valentina quieted the hubbub and, in a half-joking regal voice, declared, "We'll decide the fate of this treasure later. For now, your fairy tale queen advises her subjects to inspect the table under the awning in the yard. See whether it and the benches around it are suitable for us to have a little snack." The cheerful band of younger Guillermos rushed out of the house, and Valentina hugged her husband. My love, I don't think a museum will leap at this dresser with enthusiasm. Besides, it's crammed with all sorts of junk. In any case, everything here needs to be sorted through in detail. All the drawers are stuffed with some kind of linen items. They don't seem to be bed linens nor towels. Everything's so unusual. What do you think of my inheritance, darling? I have a feeling no one will want to buy an old little house out in the sticks. We should get to know the neighbors and test the waters. I'm getting strange feelings here, as if the ghost of this very Maximiliana still lives in this house. Juan Carlos frowned. Selling this dwelling is out of the question, Valentina. I asked you to consider our having another baby. The child will need fresh air. We'll be able to come here with the kids for the summer, even without Consuelo. She'll be starting university soon. But with Esteban and his little brother or sister, you'll be able to live here without any trouble. Don't make things up. There are no ghosts. Valentina stepped back, cut herself short. Her husband wanted to push her once again into the furnace of assisted reproduction. She had nothing against that way of having children. It had given them Esteban. But she could never go through all of that again. Out of the question. She wouldn't start a scene with Juan Carlos now, but at home she would return to this conversation. They would have no more children. Either he would accept that fact as final, or he could go. Find someone who would bear him many more. Never in their 20-year marriage had there been moments that felt so icy. An unpleasant chill ran down Valentina's back. A dark foreboding crept into her soul, like a black shadow. Valentina understood. Her husband's desire hadn't sprung from nowhere. A small sprout of a dream had already put down strong roots. Juan Carlos wouldn't back down, and she wouldn't agree. What would this conflict turn into over time? She certainly remembered that her husband came from a large family, that he was the eldest son, that after their parents' early passing, he'd become the head of the household for his brothers and sisters. Now all the younger ones from his parents' home had scattered across the huge country. Sometimes months passed without a letter, a call, any news at all. Valentina still remembered the times when one of them was always living in their house, preparing for studies, dropping by on vacation. But that didn't change her opinion one bit. She and Juan Carlos had 2 children, and that's how it would remain. Valentina was absolutely firm about that. Fortunately, once they got home, Juan Carlos didn't return to the subject of more kids. He plunged headfirst into work. In the design bureau he headed, they worked on inventions and improvements for the food industry, mainly for the hospitality sector. One day they'd dream up a miracle cabinet oven where you could cook soup, a main course, and even stew compote at the same time. Another day, they'd delight pastry chefs with a device that allowed them to decorate cakes and pastries with the most exquisite designs. Juan Carlos was a consummate insider among restaurateurs and food service owners all over the region. He and Valentina were often invited to private, invite-only parties, where the owners of new restaurants flaunted fresh tricks in cooking technology, held showcase tastings, surprised and sometimes even shocked people when Guillermo and company's gadgets made the nearly impossible possible, turning ordinary ingredients into a brand new delicacy, or reviving something served a couple of centuries ago only at royal tables. At one such gathering, Valentina met the son of a famous antiques dealer. Aureliano Castañeda Sr. was an almost legendary figure in the city. He understood antiques and never missed in his valuations. He curated exhibitions and spoiled private collectors with unusual finds. People sometimes felt he'd personally taken part in the adventures of some famous old treasure. So well did he know the history of countless rarities. Octaviano, his son, hadn't yet become such an antiques guru, but he was following in his father's professional footsteps. He specialized in furniture. When Valentina learned that, she deliberately persuaded one of her husband's colleagues to introduce her to the younger Castañeda. The purpose of the introduction was clear. She would show him photos of the dresser taken in Maximiliana's house. She'd ask what kind of marvel it was in the furniture world, whether it had value or merely looked outstanding. The small talk that sprang up between Valentina and the young specialist naturally slid into discussing the restaurant hall's furnishings. The man lamented that the establishment's owner had inexperienced consultants. They'd mixed everything together, using every style from the heaviness of Baroque to the graceful lightness of Rococo. As an example, Octaviano pointed to a dresser in the corner from which the waiters periodically took cloth napkins or clean cutlery. "Look at this beauty, Valentina. Not a single straight line. This piece is, of course, styled with French Rococo notes. The whole dresser looks like a jewelry box carelessly swelling. Open a drawer, and gold, diamonds, precious stones tumble to your feet. Everything in this masterpiece is in its place. Carving, bronze mounts, vegetal motifs." Valentina realized that, as her interlocutor was rhapsodizing over the dresser adorning the restaurant hall, it was a good moment to ask him about the dresser she'd inherited along with the house. The photos she showed him cooled her enthusiasm somewhat. Octaviano said right away that the item wasn't of special value. "It looks exotic on the surface, but it's a modern reproduction, an attempt to create an interior piece in an old spirit, in the style of dressers from the 1950s to 70s, when retro knickknacks came into fashion. The elite in that era suddenly fell in love with vintage style. But furniture also had other tasks, restraint and functionality. A fashionable trend, an imitation of Art Deco manner. The hallmark of such pieces was monumentality. The dresser in the old cottage was from that brood. Octaviano warmed to his theme. "I'm probably boring you, but consider this. Your dresser can't be classified into any standard type. It isn't a roomy workhorse with 7 drawers, nor a tall, narrow one with a huge number of compartments, nor a Spanish bargueño, the prince of aristocratic prestige." Hearing this professional monologue, Valentina stumbled at the very first term. "What bargueño?" She'd never even heard words like that. This volcano of unknowns had to be stopped at once, and she blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "Don't think me tactless, Octaviano, but do you have children? You talk about furniture with such rapture, as if it were your beloved only child, the most needed and most important." The young antiques dealer suddenly shrank back and fell silent mid-sentence. "I can't have children, Valentina. Why did you ask me that out of the blue?" Now it was Valentina's turn to blush. What had possessed her? What did children have to do with antiques? The younger Castaneda would think she was crazy or too bold, asking such questions. She tried at all costs to patch things up, to turn it into a joke. But Octaviano didn't want to leave the topic. What's more, he continued in a direction she didn't expect. "You're the first woman I've told this to so openly, since we've brought it up. We only met today, but I noticed you quite a while ago. I like you very much. Don't be alarmed, I know. I remember you're married. But I'm not used to lying about anything, least of all to a woman I'm in love with. Now you know everything about me. Please allow me to take my leave." Octaviano turned on his heel and vanished into the crowd. Valentina was in shock. She herself had seen the younger Castaneda only a couple of times at such society soirees. She'd given him no reason to fall in love. She always attended parties in Juan Carlos's company, didn't drink too much, didn't provoke awkward scenes that would make people remember her. Well, this was a turn. A stranger, clearly younger than she was, had long been in love with her. After 2 decades of marriage, Valentina had never so much as glanced sideways. She'd forgotten how to flirt. She was in turmoil. Her cheeks burned, her temples throbbed. She had completely forgotten what it was like to feel the attention of another man. She darted to a waiter passing with drinks, and instead of a glass of champagne, took a tumbler of whiskey. The obliging waiter immediately handed her a bucket of ice and tongs. Valentina mechanically dropped a few cubes into the strong drink, downed the glass in one go, then headed to the restroom, where she stood before the mirror for a long time. She'd forgotten, almost completely, that she was an attractive young woman. She took care of herself, of course, but she wasn't a beauty salon devotee. Luckily, her pretty looks still didn't require artificial tuning. Large brown eyes with a soft veil framed by thick, dark lashes, an upturned little nose, full lips, cheeks flushed by the confession she'd just heard. Hardly anyone would have guessed she was 40. She looked much younger. But that antique dealer was still, to her, a boy. 30, 35 at most. Valentina flushed and immediately thought, so this is how a woman is transformed by a confession of love from a pleasant man. Cheeks turn rosy, eyes shine, hair seems fluffier. It was like the transformation of a heroine in a Bulgakov novel. Only Valentina's beauty and youth had been granted not by a cream, but by the words of an unexpected suitor. She would forget it all at once, return to her quiet family harbor, close this accidental page borrowed from another free woman. The party ended. Vivid memories began to blur with the haze of oblivion. Now Valentina was already beginning to think her conversation with Octaviano had just been a dream. The daily grind took over. She had quit her job back when her maternity leave with Esteban ended. He was always getting sick in kindergarten, so they had to enroll him in swimming from a very young age. And he'd been so keen on building sets since childhood that the technical club was added to the pool. Valentina barely managed to drive her older daughter to the language-focused school far from home, then head off with her son to the gym, the pool, or the young engineer's studio. No one had canceled the housework either. and Juan Carlos kept chuckling. A woman's lot is to stay home and raise children. Let the man earn the money. Valentina didn't argue with him. She'd grown used to his line. Homemaker, that has a proud ring to it. She sincerely loved her Juan Carlos and the kids. If only he would stop bringing up another child. Her childbearing train had already left the station. He ought to understand that. Another couple of months passed peacefully. They didn't manage to get back to the old house, and Valentina had time to recount to her husband, in her own interpretation, the conversation with the specialist about the dresser. No one was planning to offer it to a museum anymore. Peace and quiet reigned in the family. Who would have thought it was the calm before the storm? Nothing foretold trouble that Sunday morning. They woke up later than usual. The pancake ritual for Esteban was observed. Consuelo, on summer break before her final school year, was off to the beach with friends. There were boys in the group now. First crushes, the beginnings of romance. All the friends were trustworthy, so Valentina let her daughter go with an easy heart. While Esteban was in the kids' room, breathing intently over yet another construction set, Juan Carlos suddenly told Valentina they needed to talk. She didn't like that beginning. What followed was even worse. Juan Carlos seated Valentina across from him, and then, almost cheerfully confessing, said, "Valentina, you should congratulate me. I'm soon going to be a father again. You won't believe it. Triplets. Such a rarity, such a success. The woman who's carrying my children had an ultrasound a couple of days ago. It's incredible. The machine showed she's carrying 3 at once. It was a good thing Valentina was sitting and not standing. Her husband had gone mad after 40. He already had children, their continuation together. Consuelo and Esteban. What woman? What triplets? Was he joking? Trying to get a rise out of her? But Juan Carlos calmly went on. Don't worry, I'm not leaving the family. Patricia and I agreed from the start that I would only be the father to her babies. She's already 37. All her attempts to get married failed. So she decided to have children for herself, become a single mother. We happened to be on a business trip together. We got to talking, and I offered her my services, since I can't persuade you to go through IVF again. Valentina touched her head. It seemed again like she was dreaming, like her Juan Carlos was spouting nonsense. How could a husband announce such a thing to his wife? He'd turned the birth of a child into a goal to be achieved at any cost. But this couldn't be true. This wasn't happening to her. To them. Suddenly, all her strength was gone. Valentina couldn't believe what she had just heard. She stared wide-eyed at the elated Juan Carlos. She stood up. On rubbery legs, she went to the children's room, where their son Esteban was still hunched over some creation. Only one thought pounded in her head, like an alarm bell. Divorce. She would never forgive Juan Carlos his joy today, his steely imperturbability. The end of their love, the end of their marriage. Juan Carlos didn't understand her and was genuinely perplexed. What had gotten into her with this talk of divorce? Nothing had happened. He was staying with her and the kids. That woman, she was almost like a surrogate mother. He wasn't interested in her as a person, but he would put the children down as his. Was that really so hard to grasp? The Guillermo children took Valentina's side. In court, they said clearly they wanted to stay with their mother. Juan Carlos was furious. He shouted, "We'll see how you survive. Your mother has already forgotten what it means to work. I've supported you all these years. Were you ever denied anything?" Valentina hugged Consuelo and Esteban, howling like a beluga, not understanding what was happening because he had to choose, father or mother. She promised, "Kids, we'll get through this. The apartment we lived in belongs to your father's parents. But we have that sweet old house. I'll go back there and check everything out. It's still autumn. It's not that cold. Dad will put up with all of us here while I get settled and come back for you." Watching all the negotiations and packing, Juan Carlos kept silent, as if he'd swallowed his tongue. To himself, he considered his wife and children traitors. He couldn't for the life of him see what he'd done that was so wrong. The harmonious Guillermo world collapsed almost like a house of cards. They say life is full of surprises, more intricate than anything a writer or filmmaker could invent. Valentina still couldn't believe Juan Carlos didn't understand his guilt. He was running to the market for fruit for the mother of his future children. She and they needed vitamins after all. He was choosing a stroller and a crib with 3 sections. He was seriously studying the works of child psychologists and pediatricians on raising triplets, problems and particularities. Under one figurative roof in the apartment, each now lived for their own interests. If someone had told Valentina in a nightmare that such changes would happen in her family, she wouldn't have believed it. But what happened, happened. That October turned out to be especially warm and somehow gentle. Bright, multicolored leaves rustled underfoot. Emerald, gold, ruby crimson. Gold in autumn, always so beautiful. Valentina walked from the station to the village with one of the local neighbors. The woman didn't stop talking the whole way. Maximiliana's grandniece, our Baroness. She lived here for many years, but no one really knows much about her. Around here, the news is passed through the rumor mill. That system always finds out more than the administration and the beat cop. They used to say she was one of those. Valentina asked suspiciously, "One of which those?" "Well, her last name is Vargas. Think that's just by chance." A historian once came here and stayed with her. People gossiped that the child of Alejandro Vargas's younger daughter, a man close to the royal court, from her marriage to a Spanish nobleman, actually survived, and that Maximiliana is a distant descendant of that child. Who can make sense of it, for sure? Valentina nearly stumbled at the convolutions of the historical facts and the tragic plot itself. But the talkative woman rattled on. That Alexandra died very young, at 23 in childbirth. The same rumor mill says the baby died with her. Only all the witnesses to that event have long since passed on. Who can prove now that the child didn't survive? Her fate was tragic. Now she shone, now she fell into disgrace along with her whole family. If a little branch from that era has reached our time, is that so bad? To her shame, Valentina realized she wouldn't be able to untangle the twists of a noble family's fate just by ear, without the help of the all-powerful internet prompter. By education, she was a food service technologist, actually a standardization specialist. She'd worked in her field with her husband not very long, only about 5 years after maternity leave with Consuelo. She drew up technical specifications for dishes and calculated nutritional and caloric values. What state history could she boast? At first, she tried to follow the thread about the tragedies of royal families, but then she lost it completely. At parting, the neighbor invited her to drop by once she got settled. "Here, we do everything simply, country style. If you can't find something right away for your household, come to me." The lady there was sort of blue-blooded, but around here time knocked the rough edges off. Only she never lost her pride. You don't look like her, neither in appearance nor behavior. You don't put on airs or hold your nose in the air. Valentina came to the old house in a kind of turmoil. She had expected anything from the relative who left her the inheritance, but not such a famous lineage. She hoped it was all locally spun tall tales. People get bored and start fantasizing. She would read the biography of that nobleman's daughter later. But even now, she remembered perfectly the historical scenes of that era. How could any descendants of noble families have ended up here? The old quarters greeted Valentina with silence and serenity. Her former fears and doubts vanished. No ghosts appeared, no rustles or noises disturbed her. Only one impression remained the same. A good person with a warm soul had lived on this property. The house's new mistress launched into a grand cleaning, driving out the nagging dust. She slept soundly after her labors. It seemed to her that, along with the dust, she had chased the darkness from her soul. In the morning, she busied herself again, thinking, how much love lives in people? Why does it run away so easily at the first serious trials in a family? And does that mean that such love wasn't real? The kind that can understand and forgive everything? She had no desire to see Juan Carlos, didn't miss him, and no longer ached with raw hurt and inner pain. Each of them had chosen their own path. From here on, she would go her own way. Valentina recalled a film heroine who said, "Life only begins at 40. Now I know that for sure Valentina very much wanted those words to be true for her as well. She would handle everything. She would get on her feet and raise her children. She just needed to find some kind of foothold. In a couple of days, Valentina managed to make the little house presentable. Juan Carlos was by no means a monster determined to hide household goods from his wife and children. He generously said they could take from the apartment anything they might need for the new place. Valentina and the children took little advantage of his largesse. Personal belongings, electronic gadgets, small keepsakes dear to the heart. The last time, they had found 2 sleeper armchairs in one of the rooms. Consuelo and Esteban volunteered to sleep on them. Even the old tube TV didn't faze them. Both spoke up at once again. "Mom, a laptop is enough for me. We just need to get internet installed." "It'll be both my work tool and my TV." That was Consuelo, of course. "Mommy, I'll make do with a tablet. I've got all my favorite cartoons and games downloaded on it," said sensible little Esteban. The boy had accidentally overheard adult conversations where his father mused about his other children. He asked Valentina, "Weren't Consuelo and I enough for Dad? Why didn't he ask us first, whether we wanted new brothers and sisters?" Valentina hugged her son. She didn't know what the right answer to that question would be. To say that she herself could no longer have children, and that's why things turned out this way. Or to smooth the edges, cheerfully declaring that any number of brothers and sisters in a family is always a joy and a blessing. It's easy to throw up your hands at someone else's trouble. Theirs was complicated. Grown-up Consuelo understood everything without words as soon as she learned that her father would soon have children on the side. And she stayed with her mother without hesitation. A young woman supported and understood another woman, her mother. For Esteban, all of this was still hard to sort out. But he loved his mother and sister and followed them without a second thought. If his father was now going to be busy with his other children, it was an almost adult decision for a little boy. He made it intuitively, following his heart. After settling some general matters, Valentina returned to the dresser. She decided to clear it of everything unnecessary. There was no point in selling it, but using it to store bed linens and towels would be very fitting. Upon closer inspection, the contents of that handsome old wooden fellow also turned out to be linen bedding for very large beds. To use it, it would have to be cut down, shortened, and it was old-fashioned, oddly unfamiliar. Laying everything out on the 2 armchairs, Valentina decided to treat the dresser's interior. The walls in there were smooth, except that inside one of the drawers they were, for some reason, rough. Valentina yelped in annoyance. Her hand slipped off the cloth and she scraped her hand on some bump. She treated the wound, took out a flashlight to wipe off the blood. Among the tiny, sharp splinters, a barely visible button could be seen. Valentina pressed it mechanically. There was a light creak. A small shelf slid away from the dresser's back wall, and on it lay something that flashed in the beam of the flashlight. Valentina brought out into the light a fairly large, yet delicate metal cross. She'd seen things like that in a museum. She couldn't tell what it was made of. Silver, gold, some slightly tarnished alloy, a mix of hues. In the center on both sides were enameled images. On the obverse, a woman. On the reverse, a landscape with words that looked like Latin. She wasn't strong in foreign languages. Between the arms of the cross, there was a scattering of stones. Valentina gently stroked the dresser's side. So, you're, as Esteban says, full of secrets. And you'd stashed a treasure for me. Only I'm not much good at any of this. What am I supposed to do with you now? That night, Valentina slept restlessly. For some reason, a scene from a film kept circling in her head, the debut ball of a young heroine. In that dream, she too was invited to a ball, but she didn't recognize her cavalier. Instead of a face, he wore a mask with a jester's smirk. By morning, she still hadn't decided whether to take the dream as a good omen or a bad warning. She cleaned the find, whatever it was called, of dust. She needed to go to the city to show it to specialists. There's a saying, the prey runs right to the hunter. Skeptics who believe in the spells of providence don't believe in coincidences. They claim a person's fate is written at birth, no matter how he tries to resist it. Already the next day, in the grocery store, Valentina ran into not just a professional, but a professional with a capital P. It was none other than Castañeda Aureliano himself. Her slight acquaintance with the famous antique dealer gave Valentina the courage to approach him. Castañeda Sr. didn't recognize her at first, and then suddenly smiled. "Ah, Octaviano told me about you and the dresser. You're the one who inherited that marvelous furniture rarity and discussed its merits and flaws with my son." Valentina nodded. Yes, that was her. Used to not putting things off, she offered to help Aureliano choose the groceries he needed, suggesting they chat along the way. The old man readily agreed. To his annoyance, the housekeeper had taken a few days off, and he was quite tired of dealing with household matters on his own. Meeting the helpful Valentina, who offered to help him pick the right vegetables and meats, seemed like a stroke of luck. He now merrily pushed the cart along aisles brimming with goods, agreeing without question to any choice the experienced homemaker suggested. Castañeda had no idea Valentina was divorced, and that delighted her immensely. No questions about the personal and private. The antiquary had a car with a driver. As thanks, he invited Valentina to his home for tea or coffee and to sample the pastries they had just bought. That arrangement suited Valentina perfectly. She hadn't dared bring up her find with Aureliano in the supermarket. The curious item was in her handbag. So, after enjoying coffee with oatmeal cookies and almond macarons, Valentina casually remembered, "Aureliano, since we've run into each other by chance, I'd like to ask your advice. Would that be too much trouble? After such a delicious tea time, I'm full and content with life, Valentina. Ask whatever you wish." Valentina took from her purse the little treasure she had found in the dresser's hiding place and handed it to Castañeda. He took the strange piece from her hands, put on his glasses, then suddenly jumped up from his armchair, walked over to a table with a large lamp, and pulled a magnifying glass from a drawer. A long silence fell. Valentina had the impression that time had stopped. Aureliano was silent for 20 minutes, frozen in the chair like a mute statue. She even got scared. Had the elderly man suddenly fallen ill? On the wall, an old clock ticked steadily. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And then Castaneda seemed to come to. Pinch me. This simply cannot be. But I am holding it in my own hands. Where did you get this? Valentina was a little taken aback by the reaction of the renowned antiquarian and art historian. I found this rarity yesterday, in a secret compartment of that very dresser. After the death of a distant relative, I inherited a little house in the countryside with old furnishings. That's where the dresser and this piece were found. I don't even know what to call it. Castaneda brightened immeasurably. Only 310 of these pieces, if I may use your word, were ever produced. I have good reason to suppose that I'm holding part of the Order of St. Catherine in my hands. The so-called badge of the order, with the image of the saint herself. What was your aunt's name? Vargas Maximiliana. Castaneda froze again mid-sentence, then almost cried out. Could this be a fragment of the order belonging to the wife of that Spanish nobleman, Lady Alexandra herself? But she was stripped of that honor when she fell into disgrace. Still, now, centuries later, no one will ever know the truth. Such things are strange. Orders made of gold and silver and adorned with diamonds of that size are worth fabulous sums. I think this badge has its own story too. But it itself certainly can't tell it to us. Foreign collectors would pay a tidy sum for such a relic. I don't want to push you toward anything improper, my dear. But if you show this curiosity to the authorities, they will most likely take it from you. You have no official documents granting you the right to it. That means it will automatically become state property and will adorn some museum with its brilliance and uniqueness. Valentina was stunned by Aureliano's supposition that she had found a rarity of that level. Thoughts fluttered in her head like frightened birds. She hadn't stolen this treasure. So why should she give it to someone? She had to survive somehow with her children. But could she sell this precious find? She had absolutely no experience in such transactions. Reading all the doubts on her face, Castaneda smiled. Don't worry, Valentina. I have no intention of publicizing our conversation today. I won't tell anyone about your discovery. It's yours, and it will remain yours. You alone have the right to decide its fate. If you need help selling this relic, I'll gladly assist. But there's no rush. You'll always be able to find me. After all, you've now visited our home with my son. Octaviano is away at the moment. When he returns, I'll tell him about your visit without any details. And now I'll ask my driver to take you home. It's already dark outside, and you've got a long way to go. A vague anxiety and a slight emotional unease. That's how Octaviano would have described his state today. The business trip had gone like clockwork. All the matters were resolved quickly. He was urged to stay a couple more days in the old provincial town near the border, to stroll along its narrow streets, admire the Gothic architectural curiosities. But his soul was straining to get home. He felt that some news was waiting for him there, and he wasn't wrong. His father greeted Octaviano exuberantly. He immediately started telling him that Valentina Guillermo had been to their house, by chance. But it had all been incredibly interesting. Aureliano couldn't resist and told his son about the old, rare item Valentina had shown him. He added that he'd made some inquiries among acquaintances. Apparently, Valentina had recently divorced her husband and seemed to have moved somewhere out to the countryside. Castañeda Sr. slapped his forehead. "You told the driver to take her home. We can find out from him right now where exactly she went that evening." Octaviano impatiently awaited the man who had driven Valentina home. But the driver's answers didn't shed much light on Valentina's current whereabouts. He remembered only that Guillermo had asked to be taken to the suburban railway station. She was silent the whole way through the city, and only remarked that she had plenty of time to catch the last train. The Castañedas were puzzled. The Guillermo family had seemed so solid, so close-knit. What could have come between them for them to divorce so abruptly? Aureliano merely observed. Every cottage has its own rattles, and every closet its skeletons. They may have put on the appearance of a successful marriage in public while living like cat and dog in private. That's none of our business. Oh, if any criminal types knew what a valuable object Valentina was carrying in an ordinary woman's handbag, she'd have lost her head by now. Very different thoughts and fears were wandering through the younger Castañeda's mind. He couldn't believe his luck, or rather, the possibilities that had suddenly opened up before him. After that muddled conversation with Valentina in the restaurant about the dresser and his confession of love, he hadn't been able to forget her for a minute. She wouldn't want to know him. She wouldn't choose him as her man. But he wanted her. He would try to be at her side, to help her with anything she might need, to support her in everything that concerned her. Until now, he hadn't known he could love someone so much. More than life, more than anything in the world. He wasn't even interested in the question of why her, why like this. And it hadn't started yesterday. It had been going on for quite a while. A couple of years earlier, he had been invited to a Taste Biennale, a tandem of art and creativity in the food service sphere. In a hall beautifully decorated with flowers and balloons, chefs and pastry chefs competed. The creative contest was being held in their city for the 5th time, once every 2 years, with everyone preparing well in advance. For Juan Carlos Guillermo, who developed equipment for cafes and restaurants, such a festival of flavors and spectacle was exactly the place where he picked up new clients and orders on the heels of his regular partner's success. Valentina followed her husband all over the hall. Octaviano noticed the couple from afar, or rather, to be precise, he didn't notice him. He picked her out from the lively crowd and fell in love at 34 like an inexperienced young boy. The sages say you can find anything in this world except love and death. He didn't want to think about death yet. It's inevitable, but let it wait. Love, however, comes to us on its own. It finds for us that one beloved, the only one. That's exactly what happened to Octaviano then. He saw Valentina and didn't even realize when his heart chose her. He understood everything. She was married, another man's wife, a forbidden woman. But he couldn't do anything about it. She drew him like a magnet. Even then, at the Biennale, he followed her like a shadow, like a faithful, invisible page. She noticed nothing around her. She didn't stray far from her husband. She took part in every conversation that sprang up near her spouse. Octaviano didn't dare approach her and introduce himself. The younger Castañeda had deliberately decided not to marry. Back in his youth, when he was seriously into equestrian sport and spent hours training at the racetrack, he suffered a fairly serious injury. Worried, his father brought in the most experienced doctors for treatment and rehabilitation. Their verdict was a sentence. Octaviano would never have children of his own, and it had nothing to do with that injury. Aureliano never managed to remember the name of that genetic condition. His mind rejected the truth. He didn't want to repeat a term whose essence was that Octaviano was infertile on the male side. He could have as many relationships as he liked, but no woman would be able to conceive by him. Octaviano had already lived through that misfortune and come to terms with it. He'd had many women. He was handsome, well-mannered, educated, refined. When he saw a partner starting to pick out curtains for a shared kitchen, he would end the relationship immediately and without compromise. His heart was silent, and for pleasant pastimes, he could always find someone new. He had time on his side. Only when he first saw Valentina did Octaviano seem to freeze in mid-gallop. With her, he wanted to fall asleep and wake up, make coffee together in the mornings, and on Saturdays cook her breakfast. Though why only on Saturdays? He would have liked to pamper her every second, every minute, every hour. But he stashed all those dreams far away. She didn't even favor him with a passing glance. What was the point of empty illusions? She would never be with him. But his love refused to be obedient. He dreamed of her at night. He drew her, and he drew quite well, having graduated from art school. He was mad about her. And then came their meeting in the restaurant, the conversation about the dresser. He couldn't think of another topic and clung to the furniture curiosity like a lifebuoy. He often wondered later, why did Valentina ask me about children? That subject was painful for her. She wanted another child, one he could never give her. But as far as he knew, she already had two. Octaviano didn't want to lose another day. He would find his beloved's new refuge, speak his mind to her, and offer his services. If not as a partner, then at least as a friend. Valentina, meanwhile, didn't think about the younger Castaneda at all. She thought about the elder and about what to do with her rare find. She doubted that the curious enamel cross really represented great value. Over the years, the noble metals on the badge had dulled a little, and the little stones didn't shine as brightly. Valentina was afraid to clean the ancient relic on her own. She felt it was better done by a professional restorer. She didn't spare the effort to study information online about the Order of St. Catherine the Great Martyr, also known as the Order of Liberation. This second most important decoration was awarded only to Grand Duchesses, society ladies of very high rank, wives of great statesmen. A red ribbon with a special inscription belonged to the Grand Cross. There was nothing of the kind anywhere near her find. That convinced her once again that the dresser likely hadn't concealed an original. She would have to go and see Aureliano again. He couldn't have instantly determined that the order badge wasn't a modern reproduction, the way the seemingly antique dresser turned out to be. What if some skilled jeweler had simply practiced by making an unusual piece? Valentina cut off the stream of thoughts and scolded herself. Only a week remained until moving the children to the cottage. She needed to sort out the remaining things once and for all. Get used to the local infrastructure, starting with that crucial place, the grocery store. Get better acquainted with the neighbors. She and the kids were moving here for a long time, perhaps forever. The next day, Valentina set herself a pile of tasks. She photographed the train schedule at the station, copied the bus timetable at the stop, and assessed the capabilities of the village's two shops. Not much, but all the essentials were there. She would bring the rest from the city from time to time. She didn't even admit it to herself. It was a little scary to start from scratch at 40. She didn't hear the knock at the door right away. She decided it was the talkative neighbor. Valentina had dropped by her place during the day. This was probably a return visit. Shouting for the woman to come in, she hurried to put the kettle on the stove. Enameled, pot-bellied, red, with big white polka dots. A kind of relic in its own right. In the city, most people preferred electric kettles. In the cottage, however, she had found a teapot and a sugar bowl with the same polka dots. A new knock at the door pulled Valentina from these thoughts. Who's so timid out there? It's not locked. She opened the door. On the threshold stood Octaviano Castañeda. Valentina had perhaps never been so surprised in her life. You? From where? Octaviano coughed, embarrassed. I managed to get your address almost by partisan methods, through your husband's colleague who introduced us at the restaurant. Your Juan Carlos didn't suspect a thing, that it was for me. I wouldn't want to compromise you. Valentina smiled at everything at once, at the younger Castañeda's spontaneity, at his now unnecessary concern for her reputation, at his ardor and embarrassment. Come in, since you're here. Did Aureliano send you about the Order of St. Catherine? Do you want to see it, since you've come all this way? Octaviano shook his head. I don't need any rarity. I need you. His palms were sweating. He had the urge to hug Valentina. Sensibly reining in his inner fire, he followed the hostess into the house. He didn't want to hide or invent anything at all. So he, as if continued their conversation from the restaurant after they'd met. Valentina, I've come to talk to you once more. In the time we haven't seen each other, nothing has changed in my soul or in my heart. I still love you. I understand my declarations mean nothing to you, but I ask nothing of you. Let me be your friend, be by your side, help you. For now I'm asking no more. I only hope that, with time, you'll look at me with different eyes. And again, Valentina felt the blood rush to her cheeks. For the second time, this man had such a passionate effect on her. He made her remember that she was a woman, that she could be loved. She had almost forgotten what that felt like. Her confusion was cut short by a new knock at the door. This time it really was the neighbor with a pie, instantly diffusing the mood in the house. Valentina, forgive me. I didn't know you had company, and I whipped up a pie in a hurry. The neighbor chattered on enthusiastically, sipping tea from a big mug and biting sugar. Octaviano and Valentina kept silent. Each had plenty to think about. They both had their own pasts carried on their backs. Octaviano stayed at Valentina's house for a few days. He was close, but not with her. She was grateful that he made no attempts to press for a closer intimacy. He slept in the room with the dresser, on one of the folding armchairs. The light in there burned late into the night, but Valentina didn't pry into what he was doing. On the day he left, he handed her a drawing. In it, Valentina was dressed in a woman's gown from the era of royal courts. Below the waist, a red bow displayed the badge of the Order of St. Catherine. On her chest gleamed the golden star that belongs with that decoration. Castañeda explained, I drew what I see. You deserve this honor for your courage. To me, you are the best woman on this earth. Just remember that. I'll come by in a day to help you move the children and the remaining things. In the days they spent together, they managed to grow close in spirit. They switched to first names and put all the courtesies and niceties aside. Valentina told her new friend plainly why she had divorced her husband. Octaviano was indignant. Don't judge me if you can help it. But between the woman I love and the possibility of having children, I would choose the beloved woman. You'll say I talk like this only because I've never been and will never be a father. Not at all. If I knew there were even the slightest risk to your health or to your moral well-being, I would choose you. After Octaviano left, doubts assailed Valentina again. Why did he need her? Did he want to get his hands on the notorious order? She still didn't know what to do with the relic that had fallen into her lap. After all her pondering, she decided to consult Octaviano anyway. If he was interested in the jewel she had found, if it was genuine, he would surely give himself away somehow. After breaking with Juan Carlos, Valentina felt it would be a long time before she could trust a man again. She didn't hide from herself that Castañeda appealed to her, that he stirred her. But she was still afraid to embark on a relationship with him. Valentina adjusted the canopy on the stroller and anxiously touched the baby girl's cheek to make sure she hadn't gotten cold outside. Warm male arms wrapped around her shoulders from behind. Still worrying, Grandma Valentina, that Katerina will catch a chill? We'll all go inside soon. How good that we managed to refurbish the house before the cold set in. You don't regret agreeing to live in my city apartment with the kids and the granddaughter, do you? Valentina turned to her husband. They had been together for 3 years now, and she still hadn't fully grown used to his sincere, warm care. Back then, after her divorce, after Octaviano first came to her house, how many fears she had in her head. Everything had seemed empty. Valentina didn't present her antique find to the authorities. Aureliano Castañeda, an old sly fox, renowned art historian and antiquarian, found a buyer abroad for the piece of the Order of St. Catherine. The main condition of the deal was complete anonymity. The new owner of the rarity knew nothing about where Castañeda Sr. had dug up such a treasure. He admired his acquisition quietly. And the very story of how the legacy of St. Catherine the Great Martyr appeared in Maximiliana's house remained a mystery to all involved. After a little thought, Valentina and Octaviano decided to put the proceeds toward charity. Both had faced difficulties having children. Let there be fewer such misfortunes around. One of the reproductive technology centers in their city acquired cutting-edge equipment. A wonderful renovation was done, furniture was purchased, the interior refreshed. The younger Castañedas concealed their involvement in this medical project. True nobility, like happiness, loves silence. Valentina's children accepted Octaviano at once, without reservation. They believed he wouldn't bring their mother pain. They appointed him an interesting friend and a person to trust. They rarely saw their biological father. He was fully absorbed by the triplets. The children of his ex-wife interested him now only so-so. The experience of fatherhood, even of the kind where the kids are already older, became a magical wonder for Octaviano. Not only had he managed to persuade the woman he loved to be with him, but her children also believed in him. A banal comparison, perhaps, but there's no better way to say it. He was in seventh heaven, flying, soaring, learning what it meant to be head of a family and a dad. Valentina couldn't have explained to herself why, in one fine moment, she so wanted to be with Octaviano specifically. He was 4 years younger than she, trifles. Everything happened very quickly. And who are the judges? Castañeda insisted they register their relationship officially. He was so proud that she was his wife. Like he had pulled all the stars from the distant constellation Orion and brought them down to Earth. The younger Castañeda was an established professional. Earning bread and butter for himself and his beloved woman was no trouble. He accepted all of Valentina's terms, moved to the countryside, where he and his wife and the children restored the old cottage, learned to fish, mow the grass, and split firewood. Are such chores anything for a handyman? He worked remotely, ran into the city as needed, and was endlessly happy. Consuelo entered university and fell madly in love in her first year with an upper-class student. At least she didn't drop her studies. First love, first serious disappointments. The proud Valeriano, upon learning that his girlfriend was pregnant, vanished without a trace. Fortunately, his time at the university was drawing to a close. Little Katerina was born healthy and strong. She wasn't destined to know her father, but that isn't the worst misfortune in the world. How delighted Grandpa Octaviano and Grandma Valentina were at her arrival. After spending a little time with the baby, Consuelo returned to the city for classes. She lived in the dorm, studied, and visited her family on weekends. Everything settled back into place, as it should. Esteban was growing up. For now he attended the village school. He still hadn't parted with his construction sets. He dreamed of becoming a builder. Moreover, he took on organizing a club for the younger grades. The school approved the idea. Esteban was immensely proud of himself. He caused his parents no trouble at all. No time for foolishness. He also had to help out as the elder with his niece. Arm in arm, Octaviano and Valentina climbed the porch steps into the house. Grandma Valentina was carrying the sleeping little one. The room that had housed the antique dresser was now the nursery. Valentina took off her granddaughter's warm snowsuit and hung it over the radiator. They had redone much of the house in a modern way. Maximiliana wouldn't have recognized her home, where a quiet, cozy happiness now dwelt. Without agreeing on it, Octaviano and Valentina stroked the dresser's rounded side and laughed. "Old fellow, aren't you hiding any more surprises for us in there?" Valentina said. "Thank you, old friend, for bringing me together with the woman I love. We'll never sell you or give you away. You're our family talisman," Octaviano said. And isn't he right?
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.